Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's Frank again with another episode. I wanted to continue on with the six taboo topics. Now, one of the topics I want to bring up um, from the rest, going to the second one, I want to bring up the taboo topic of race. Okay. Uh, One of the things I could definitely say is growing up, in addition to understanding various things that are going on in the world, let alone within the United States, is that race definitely has a big play in certain ways that you're able to move. Um, but one of the things I've realized is it's not a topic that I play with, especially with the level of growing up that I've done when it comes down to my various experiences in life. If you haven't noticed, I'm, if I can say this, I'm black. I'm a black man. Um, some people will call me African American. If I'm in other countries, some people will uh, may say such thing as negrito. Uh, if I'm in another country, some people will just blatantly just call me an American, especially if they, listen to how I speak. Um, but one of the things I definitely know and understand is in this world, we have been conditioned, various aspects. We have been conditioned to treat the level of melanin in someone's skin or the amount of pigmentation that you have. We've been conditioned to believe it in a certain level of importance. To give an example, when it comes down to colorism, colorism, for a fact, is all around the world. It's something that at times we can't avoid. I would say the only time that I've been able to somewhat avoid, and I say somewhat loosely, somewhat avoid colorism specifically, is when I was in Africa. But then also, mind you, to bring more context to that, um, I don't speak any of the national languages in some of the countries that I've gone to. Um, in addition to the fact that I'm not fully ingrained in understanding the culture that I'm being immersed in, where there may be certain levels of colorism happening there, but I definitely understand that colorism often happens all around the world, um, and that level of colorism is tied to race in various ways, where the way we see race in the United States may not necessarily be the way race is seen within, let's just say, South Africa, that country, to give an example, um, where a lot of times race may deal with a particular cultural norm. It may deal with a particular subset group of people in a specific way that has nothing to do with the pigmentation in their skin, but everything to do with the culture they exude, or certain traits they exude, or not the color, but maybe even features when it comes down to specific features that they may have. Where you can also tie race somewhat in other countries, maybe to even tribalism. But there are various isms that go into the aspect of race. I know within the United States, me being here, especially the various things that have happened within a couple of years, but have happened in various forms for so long. You have two sides. One side is considered to be what is considered to be normal, and the other side is what is considered to be abnormal. Okay, um, that can fall within anyone's mind. where I know that the biggest thing that has affected race within the United States specifically is, and I will have to say, the eugenics movement, or at least that's one aspect. Another aspect, definitely when it comes down to slavery, as far as certain teachings that were done during that time period, as far as the marginalization of slaves back then. Majority of the slaves back then were, um, let's say, African slaves, majority of them. Not all. I mean, we can, go into the aspect of indentured servitude. We can go into, aspects of one's being able to essentially, uh, be used for marginal work. Wow, fucked up that word. Whatever. Marginal work. But one of the things I've realized is how race is seen, how it's being portrayed today, how others see it, in addition to the historical factors that have created the minds that we see now, I don't really believe is a great thing. You know, one of the things that I could definitely say, especially in this world, race at times can be a burden. At times it can be a burden, especially how you're seen or you needing to be seen in a certain way. Um, One of the things I understand, definitely, most definitely, especially when it comes down to my travels, I understand that race definitely has a part everywhere. Um, but then also, when it comes down to being in the United States, we kind of brand race in a specific way that has become more popular in other countries. Um, to give an example, when I was working in Finland, there was a situation where I ended up meeting up with this woman that I was dating at the time. I ended up meeting up with this woman at her apartment building, and I was there for a little bit of time to be able to hang out with her. But then I had to go back home, and I was waiting downstairs on my ride to get there, and I was in the building because I didn't want to, be outside because it was fairly cold. I was in the building. There was a little bit of heat in the building, so I was in the building at the threshold where the doors were, going outside of, her apartment building. And so there was a couple that ends up walking, up to the door, and they started knocking on the door, and they asked me, could I open the door? And I had to tell them, and this is, what I'm thinking in mind, I automatically thought, okay, these people are homeless. Maybe they're one trying to, find a place to stay, keep warm, what may have you. But then also in turn, one other thing to think about is I don't live in this building. I don't live in this building. I shouldn't be held responsible for bringing somebody in a building and potentially they end up doing something to someone, and then that's my fault for letting them in the building. Nevertheless, uh, the couple, they were white, white, Caucasian, whatever term that you want to use, and all of a sudden, um, when I'm telling them I cannot do that, I don't live here. I'm telling them that I cannot do that. I don't live here. All of a sudden, they just start throwing the N bomb, and in my mind, I got pissed, flat out. I got pissed. Um, at first, in my mind, I'm like, you know what? F this. This is BS. You know, who are they to call me that? That was the first thing that popped in my mind. And when that popped in my mind, I started yelling at them and I started walking toward, the threshold of the door, and I was acting like I was going to open the door. And once they started seeing me walk toward, they started, kind of walking in the opposite direction. And then once they were walking in the opposite direction, my ride came, and my ride, they saw me, yelling at that couple. And then what they did was they ended up spinning the block, or they, went around the block and came back because of the commotion that was going on between me and that couple. And then when I really thought about it afterward, what was the point of me yelling? You know, some people, in this world, they will use what they need to use to be able to trigger someone because they are pissed off about something. You know, they were pissed off at the fact that I wouldn't let them in the building. But that's not my responsibility because I'm not a tenant of that building. But they're not thinking that in mind. They're just thinking, oh, well, he's there. He should let us in. Who am I to let you in a building that I do not live in? And that was my logic at the time. But the funny thing is, during that time, after that happened, I told a few of my coworkers, what happened, what may have you. And some of my coworkers, which is hilarious to me, it was like a split down the middle. Some of my coworkers were like, well, you should have let them in. I mean, you could tell that they were homeless. And then some of them were like, no, why let them in? They were, I wouldn't even say they were on my side. They were more so, they were nuanced in their indifferences. Where they were like, someone were like, oh, well, don't let them in. Obviously it's not your responsibility. But then someone were like, well, don't let them in. You don't know if they could probably try to rob somebody or even, murder somebody, just to be able to steal something, what may have you. And they were, going back and forth on that. But the biggest thing that they ended up ignoring was the aspect of the couple being pissed off and then them, throwing the N-bomb out freely like it was running water. And then I realized, in the United States, we've packaged racism so much in a certain way that inevitably others, in other countries, they understand what can trigger a particular person, especially if that person is a different race than them. Where a lot of people don't even really know the history behind the word. And maybe I'm, I kind of go back and forth on the word myself, where for me, when it comes down to art, when I speak about art, speak about poetry more specifically. When it comes down to art, I feel like no word should be taboo. No word should be left alone in the scope of being able to convey art, which is, in essence, conveying a message for people to understand something. So, on one hand, I don't hold any punches when it comes down to the usage of the word and the different forms of the word within writing and poetry. But I try to prevent myself from the usage of the word when it comes down to my regular speech. Where maybe I'm a walking contradiction. No, I am a walking contradiction. Where when it comes down to art should be in the aspect of being able to convey something in a certain way, and you have to use every bit of means to be able to convey that thing in that way. But then it's like when you go through experience, now mind you, that wasn't the first time, somebody of, some white person throwing an N-bomb at me. When I was younger, that was a regular occurrence. When it came down to me living in my grandmother's neighborhood, and there were a few white neighbors, down the block, um, who were fairly racist, but majority of the neighborhood were black people. You know, black people that were middle class, high class, well off, but not as well off, but fairly well off, if that makes sense. Um, but one of the things I also talk about is, the aspect of being as objective as possible. But even during that time, I couldn't be objective because of, one, me knowing the history of the word, and two, the trigger of a white person using, or two white people using that word against me, and they know, maybe to some degree, or maybe to even the full degree, they know that is a way for them to be able to regain power. But the only way they were able to regain power, if I can even say that, was in the aspect of them pissing me off. Because let's just say I got really pissed off and I wanted to, let's just say, beat both of their asses, or some shit. Let's just say that wouldn't have been good for me. That wouldn't have been a good thing, especially what I was doing when it came down to my work, being in another country. And mind you, I've been to 11 countries, 11, and counting, because I tend to travel, more. I've been to 11 countries, and one of the things that I see, when it comes down to race and how race is seen, it's like either nobody wants to talk about it, or you just have it blatant within your face. It's either one or the other. Nobody wants to talk about it, or it's just blatant and it's there, and people are just going to act the way they act. And that's two far ends of a spectrum, and that spectrum itself, in my personal opinion, is not the spectrum that we need. We need another spectrum where we're able to talk about certain things, especially historical things, historical occurrences that have happened, and the happenings now, and how they're tied to what those historical occurrences are. To give an example, one of the things I always say all the time is, for you to be able to understand the bitter fruit, you have to look at the roots. For you to be able to understand the bitter fruit, you have to look at the roots. Where oftentimes now, and this is just not only with race, but a lot of times you have a lot of people who will only point the finger at the outcome, but they won't tie a historical context to it. Will only point the finger at the outcome and be pissed off at the outcome, downplay the outcome, elevate the outcome, put the outcome out there as, the worst thing in the world, or put the outcome out there as nothing to be worried about, but never bring any historical context to it whatsoever. Which is mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling to me. Like, what can we do in this world to pull away from the aspect of using race as a power tool? And one of the things I think about now is one of the reasons why, maybe when it comes down to these colors, I'm so tied to this. And if you know what these colors are, I'm not even going to explain it. You already know what it is. You know what it's about. Nevertheless, the colors are shown here, but in essence, I try to exude these colors every day, when it comes down to the aspect of one detail of what these mean. Nevertheless, for me, I get tired of ignorance. Um, I get tired of the various isms that go into race. I get tired of seeing, the consistent projections of how the eugenics movement, when it came down to Francis Galton, how the eugenics movement back then is still resurfacing itself now. I get tired of it, and I know for me, I have more experiences when it comes down to race because I am black. I am a black man, and black men are seen in certain ways in various countries, but more specifically in the United States, are seen in a certain way that is not conducive for us being seen as human beings. It's not. Where also, how can we talk about race objectively? How can we put race out there objectively in addition to putting race out there as a means to have a conversation where we are now starting to build a culture, to build a intellectual norm that pushes the narrative of we all should be seen in one way. We all should be seen as human beings. But one of the things that we have to do is not believe race doesn't exist and not completely go on the opposite end where we're just spewing hatred to every fucking body. We have to really break down the aspects of how we have come to be to what we are today and be able to dismantle that and start a new way of thinking, so we don't have groups creating themselves in the aspect of just spewing hatred, so we don't have a consistent means of one race being profiled by the police in a different way than another race, so we don't have certain aspects of, if one race is being seen as a model minority of another race, then that term or the concept of model minority is now being promoted in such a way where, well, if you're going to be of a lower class, then you should, act like them because they are of a lower class and they act correct how we think they should act correct. It's all whack. At the end of the day, I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to protect, who's my family. At the end of the day, regardless, whatever happens, I'm going to always understand what is happening around me and how I need to protect myself. But also in turn, I'm one of the ones in this world that can talk about things objectively and being able to bring up certain controversial things, but still be objective about it. Maybe that's something that we all in the world need to understand and know in reference to having an objective conversation and being able to grow from that objective conversation in the best way where we are looking at the best interests in others. Nevertheless, I'm Frank. This is another episode, Pondering series. Y'all take it easy.